What if the galaxy we thought we knew was about to shatter into something unrecognizable? Picture this. Across a million worlds, in the dying light of the 41st millennium, something is shifting. The Imperium of man, that vast, decaying monument to humanity's former glory, stands at a precipice it hasn't faced in 10,000 years. The Great Rift has torn reality itself in half, splitting the galaxy like a wound that refuses to heal. On one side, the light of the Astronomicon barely reaches. On the other, worlds drown in darkness, cut off from Terra's guiding beacon. And in between, chaos incarnate, spilling through the veil between dimensions like blood from a fresh cut. But here's what keeps the scholars of the Black Library awake at night. What makes even the most battle-hardened space marines pause in their eternal crusade. This might only be the beginning. The lore of Warhammer 40,000 has always been a tapestry woven from war, tragedy, and the slow, inexorable march toward oblivion. Yet now, for the first time in decades, the story is moving, not crawling, not repeating the same cycles of endless war, actually moving forward. The return of Roboute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, shattered the static nature of the setting. A demigod who walked alongside the Emperor himself now leads humanity's defense, his face a mask of barely concealed horror at what his father's dream has become. Think about that moment. Imagine sleeping for 10 millennia, expecting to wake to the galaxy your father promised, only to find it transformed into a nightmare theocracy that worships him as a god, the very thing he despised most. Guilliman's indomitous crusade pushed back against the darkness, bringing hope to worlds that had forgotten the word. But hope in the grim darkness of the far future is a dangerous, fleeting thing. So where does the story go from here? What threads are the architects at Games Workshop pulling, and which ones are about to snap? The Primarchs are returning, that much is certain. Guilliman was just the first. Across the galaxy, in stasis chambers and prison dimensions, in the warp itself, his brothers wait. Some loyal, some corrupted beyond recognition. Lion L. Johnson has already emerged from the forests of Caliban, stepping back into a galaxy that moved on without him. The Dark Angel's greatest secret and greatest shame, now walking among them again. Two Primarchs loyal to the Emperor now stand against the tide. But the traitor Primarchs have been active for far longer. Magnus the Red broods in his tower on Sortiarius. Mortarion spreads his plagues across the plague planet. Fulgrim indulges in endless sensation. Angron rages eternal. Perturabo builds. Loga preaches. And somewhere in the Eye of Terror, Abaddon the Despoiler commands them all, no longer content to be merely the chosen of chaos, but its undisputed champion. The narrative mathematics are simple and terrible. The traitors outnumber the loyalists. For the Imperium to survive, more Primarchs must return. And here's where the speculation becomes fascinating, where the hints and teases scattered across codexes and campaign books start to form a pattern. Lemon Russ, the Wolf King, disappeared into the Eye of Terror 10,000 years ago, seeking a way to heal the Emperor. His space wolves still howl his name, still believe he'll return during their darkest hour. The signs are there, hidden in the margins of recent lore, references to a great hunt. Whispers of something moving through the warp, something that makes even demons flee. Could the Savage King be tracking his traitor brothers, preparing to drag them back to justice or oblivion? Jagatai Khan vanished into the webway, chasing dark Eldar raiders. The white scars speak of him as if he's merely delayed, not lost. What if he's been mapping the webway all this time, learning its secrets, preparing humanity for a war fought not in real space, but in those ancient corridors between dimensions? The Eldar guard their webway jealously, but what if the Khan has become something they never expected? Not an invader, but a fellow traveler, perhaps even an ally. Corvus Corax pursued Lorgar into the Eye of Terror, consumed by rage and transformation. The Raven Guard whisper that their father became something else in that realm of madness, something that hunts demons through the Immaterium itself. Recent lore describes him as a being of shadow and talons, no longer quite human, no longer quite Primarch. What walks out of the Eye of Terror when Corax decides his hunt is complete might not be the noble warrior who entered, but something far more dangerous to chaos. Then there's Vulcan, the Perpetual, the one Primarch who literally cannot die. He's playing the longest game of all, leaving artifacts scattered across the galaxy, waiting for the moment when all 9 are united. The Salamanders believe this will herald his return, but what if it's more than that? What if Vulcan foresaw this exact moment in history, this precise configuration of crisis, and prepared accordingly? But the Loyalists aren't the only ones stirring. The traitor Primarchs are consolidating power, emerging from their demon worlds with renewed purpose. Mortarian's invasions grow bolder. Magnus schemes against both his brothers and his puppet masters in the Chaos Pantheon. Even Fulgrim, lost to hedonism and sensation, seems to be moving with intent for the first time in millennia. They know something. They're preparing for something. And then there's the other shoe waiting to drop. The Emperor himself. He's been sitting on the Golden Throne for 10,000 years, a corpse sustained by the sacrifice of 1,000 psychers every single day. His consciousness exists simultaneously in the Imperium and the Warp, fighting an eternal war against the Chaos Gods themselves. But the throne is failing. Every tech priest who examines it, same nightmare in their calculations. The machinery is degrading beyond repair. Guilliman knows this. He looked upon his father and found not divinity, but something vast and terrible and burning with purpose. What happens when the throne finally fails? Does the Emperor die? Does he ascend to godhood for real, becoming the very thing he swore to prevent? Or does something else occur, something nobody has predicted? Some whisper of the Star Child, the fragment of the Emperor's compassion separated from his rage, waiting in the warp to be reborn. Others speak of the Sensei, his immortal children, hidden throughout the galaxy. The Illuminati, a secret society working toward the Emperor's resurrection through means both sacred and profane. These are old threads in the lore, forgotten by many, but nothing in Warhammer is ever truly abandoned. Everything eventually comes back, transformed and terrible. The Necrons are awakening faster now. The Tyranids continue their approach, their hive fleets like locusts, consuming everything in their path. The Tau expand their empire, naive believers in the greater good while darkness closes in. The Eldar walk their path toward extinction with elegant resignation, but even they sense something building, some confluence of fate that will determine whether any of them survive to see the next age. Everything is converging. Every faction, every Primarch, every ancient power is moving toward some invisible point on the horizon. The question isn't whether something cataclysmic will happen. The question is what form it will take and who will still be standing when the smoke clears. The story of Warhammer 40,000 is moving toward an ending. Not the ending of the game, not the end of new models and books and campaigns, but a narrative climax that will fundamentally reshape what the setting is. An 11th edition that might finally answer the question that's been hanging over the galaxy for 40 years of real-world time. Can humanity survive? Should it? And deep in the warp, in the spaces between thoughts and nightmares, something laughs. Because it already knows how this story ends, or does it? The Chaos Gods are not omniscient, despite what their worshippers believe. They are reflections, distortions of mortal emotion given terrible form in the warp. They see patterns, possibilities, threads of fate that stretch across time like spider silk. But the future is not fixed, even for gods. And there are powers in the galaxy older than chaos, deeper than the warp, that move according to laws even the ruinous powers cannot fully comprehend. Consider the Silent King, Sharek, last of the Triarch, who led his entire race into damnation, who traded flesh and blood and soul for cold metal immortality. He has returned from his self-imposed exile beyond the galaxy's edge, and what he saw out there in the intergalactic void terrified him enough to come back. The Tyranids are coming in numbers that dwarf anything the galaxy has yet witnessed. Hive fleets beyond counting, A living apocalypse that will consume every scrap of biomass from every world, leaving nothing but scoured rock and silence. The Necrons cannot be eaten, cannot be absorbed into the hive mind's collective hunger. They will survive the Tyranid invasion. They will inherit a dead galaxy, empty and perfect and utterly pointless. Sharek doesn't want this. After 60 million years of soulless existence, the Silent King has learned something that his younger, more arrogant self never understood. An empire of the dead is no empire at all. He seeks biotransference in reverse, a way to restore the Necrontyr to flesh, to mortality, to the brief, beautiful tragedy of organic life. And for that, he needs the galaxy alive. He needs humanity, the Eldar, even the Orcs to survive. The irony would be poetic if it weren't so desperate. The architect of his race's damnation now works to preserve the very species he once saw as beneath notice. But here's what makes this truly fascinating from a narrative perspective. The Silent King cannot save the galaxy alone. He knows this. His legions are vast, his technology beyond mortal comprehension. But the Tyranids are vaster still, and they learn, they adapt, they evolve with every world they consume. So Sharek does something unprecedented in Necron history. He reaches out, not with demands or threats, but with offers of alliance. To the Imperium, to the Eldar, to anyone who will listen. Imagine being Roboute Guilliman, avenging son, Lord Commander of the Imperium, and receiving an emissary from the Silent King. This thing that was once alive, then chose death, now seeks life again. This Xenos abomination extending a hand in alliance against a threat so vast, it makes the Horus heresy look like a skirmish. Every fiber of the Codex Astartes, every teaching of the Emperor, every instinct honed over 10,000 years of warfare screams to refuse, to destroy the messenger and prepare for war. But Guilliman is a pragmatist, perhaps the only Primarch who truly was. He understands mathematics, logistics, the cold calculus of survival. He knows that pride is a luxury the Imperium can no longer afford. This is the razor's edge the story walks now. The fundamental question at the heart of Warhammer 40,000 has always been, what does it cost to survive? How much of your humanity, your principles, your soul can you sacrifice before survival becomes meaningless? The Imperium has already paid in blood and suffering beyond measure. It has become the very tyranny the Emperor fought against during the Unification Wars. It burns psychers as fuel, works billions to death in factory hives, considers individual human life less valuable than a single bolt shell. And now, to survive the Tyranid threat, it might have to ally with the very Xenos it has spent 10 millennia trying to exterminate. The Eldar understand this calculus better than anyone. They are dying, have been dying since the fall, when their hedonism birthed Slaanesh and murdered their gods. Every craft world is a lifeboat fleeing an explosion that happened thousands of years ago, knowing the shockwave is still coming. Eldred Alfrin, oldest and most powerful of the Farseers, has seen the threads of fate converging. He has walked the path of the seer longer than human civilization has existed, and what he sees in the skein of possibility makes even his ancient heart quicken with something almost like fear. There are futures where the galaxy burns, futures where chaos wins, where the Tyranids consume everything, where the Necrons restore their flesh only to find themselves alone in an empty universe. But there are other futures, narrow paths threading through catastrophe, where something survives, where something new emerges. These paths all require the impossible, cooperation between species that have been at war since before humanity discovered fire. They require Primarchs working together who couldn't agree when their father walked among them. They require sacrifices that will reshape the fundamental nature of reality itself. And the clock is counting down. The Golden Throne's degradation isn't gradual anymore. Tech priests who maintain it report fluctuations in its power output, moments where the Astronomicon flickers and goes dark for seconds at a time. Across the galaxy, navigators scream as the Emperor's light vanishes, stranding their ships in the warp. Most of the time, the light returns. Most of the time, the ships emerge back into real space. Their crews age decades in moments or driven mad by what they saw in that darkness. But the fluctuations are getting longer, more frequent. The Adeptus Mechanicus estimates centuries until total failure. Guilliman's own calculations, hidden from all but his closest advisors, suggest decades. Maybe less. What they don't know, what nobody except the Emperor himself knows, is that the fluctuations aren't failures. They're experiments. The Emperor is testing something, pushing against the boundaries of the throne's containment, seeing what happens when he withdraws his consciousness from the Imperium for brief moments. He's preparing for something. After 10,000 years of stasis, locked in an endless psychic war, the master of mankind is moving again. But toward what end? That's the question that should terrify everyone. The Emperor was never stable, even in life. He was a Gestalt consciousness, a fusion of ancient shamans who sacrificed themselves to create a being powerful enough to guide humanity through the age of strife. He was pragmatic to the point of cruelty, brilliant to the point of blindness, powerful beyond measure, but unable to understand the human hearts of his own sons. What has 10,000 years of agony and apotheosis done to that consciousness? The man who hated religion now has a galaxy-spanning faith built in his name. The atheist who denied the gods has become a god himself in all but acknowledgement. Does he embrace it? Reject it? Or has he transcended such concepts entirely, becoming something so far beyond human comprehension that his goals no longer align with humanity's survival? Guilliman fears this. In his private moments, when even his equerry has been dismissed, the Lord Commander of the Imperium allows himself to feel the weight of that fear. He has spoken with his father, such as it was. The experience left him shaken in ways that even the Horus heresy did not. He saw something vast and cold and burning with purpose, something that looked at him not with paternal love, but with the distant acknowledgement one might give a useful tool. If the Emperor has a plan, Guilliman is not certain humanity will survive its implementation. Meanwhile, in the Eye of Terror, Abaddon the Despoiler stands before a map of the galaxy that shifts and writhes with warp stuff, showing not just the present but possible futures. His Black Crusades have achieved more than most realize. Yes, he broke Cadia and tore the galaxy in half. Yes, he commands demon Primarchs and has the favor of all 4 Chaos gods, an achievement that should be impossible but for him simply is. But his true goal has always been more complex than simple destruction. Abaddon was once Ezekiel Abaddon, first captain of the Luna Wolves, right hand to Horus Lupercal, the most favored son of the most beloved Primarch. He saw his father corrupted, used, and ultimately discarded by the Chaos gods. He saw the dream of the Great Crusade twisted into a nightmare that served entities that cared nothing for humanity's ascension or damnation, only for the endless feast of emotion and suffering they could extract from mortal souls. Abaddon hates the Emperor, yes, but he also hates the gods he serves. He is playing a deeper game, using chaos against itself, positioning pieces for a moment, when he can strike not just at the Imperium but at the very nature of the warp itself. He knows about the pylons, the Necron technology that can dampen or even nullify warp influence. He knows what Cadia truly was, a fortress world built atop the largest concentration of pylons in the galaxy, holding back the Eye of Terror through technology older than the human species. He destroyed it not to release chaos, but to study what happened when those pylons fell. He is learning, preparing, and when the moment comes when the Emperor finally makes his move, Abaddon will be ready to make his own. All of these threads, all of these plots and counterplots and plans within plans, they're accelerating now. Something is pulling them together, forcing confrontation, demanding resolution. The meta-narrative of Warhammer 40,000 can no longer sustain eternal stalemate. The business model might prefer endless war, infinite gray plastic armies clashing across infinite battlefields, but the story itself has gained momentum that cannot be stopped without breaking something fundamental. And perhaps that's the point. Perhaps the 11th edition isn't just an update to rules and models. Perhaps it's the moment when the setting admits what it's been building toward for 4 decades. An actual, genuine, terrifying climax. Not an end to the game, but a transformation so complete that everything after will be fundamentally different from everything before. The Primarchs will return. All of them, loyal and traitor alike, drawn to this moment like moths to a flame. The Emperor will make his move, whatever that means. The Tyranids will arrive in force. The Necrons will play their hand. The Eldar will enact their final gambit. And in the center of it all, billions of ordinary humans, guardsmen and civilians, will live and die and never understand the cosmic forces determining their fate. Because that's what Warhammer has always been about, underneath the gods and monsters. It's about the individual human in the trenches, holding a lascan that might as well be a flashlight against the horrors of the galaxy, standing their ground anyway because what else is there to do? It's about the space marine who has lived for centuries, who has forgotten what it means to be human, rediscovering it in the moment before death. It's about the cost of survival, the price of hope, and the question of whether either is worth it when the universe itself seems determined to answer no. And then, cutting through all the speculation and theory, comes a piece of concrete evidence. A recent campaign book, easy to miss, tucked into the lore section like it's nothing important. A reference to something called the Vashtorr ascending, to a new god being born, not from the warp alone, but from the intersection of materium and immaterium, flesh and machine, chaos and order. Vashtorr, the Archephane, a demon who seeks to become something more, who has been gathering artifacts and technology and power for this precise moment. The birth of a new chaos god, not in the distant past, but now in real time. As we watch, the birth of a god is not a quiet thing. Even when it happens in dimensions beyond mortal comprehension, the galaxy feels it. Psychers across a million worlds wake, screaming from nightmares of twisted geometries and impossible machines fusing with living flesh. Navigators report new currents in the warp, technological in nature, flowing with a purpose that feels alien even to the chaos of the immaterium. The Mechanicus detects anomalies in their most sacred forges, whispers in the machine code that sound almost like prayers being answered by something that is listening for the first time. Vashtorr represents something unprecedented, something that breaks the fundamental rules everyone thought they understood about how the warp operates. The 4 chaos gods were born from mortal emotion, Khorne from rage and bloodshed, Nurgle from despair and entropy, Tzeentch from ambition and scheming, Slaanesh from excess and sensation. They are reflections, parasites feeding on the psychic emanations of thinking beings. But Vashtorr is different. He is born not just from emotion, but from the relationship between consciousness and technology, from the prayers of tech priests who worship the Omnissiah, from the dreams of machines that might be dreaming back, from the belief that flesh is weak and steel is eternal. He is what happens when faith and technology become so absolute that it creates its own god in the warp. And this changes everything about the metaphysics of the setting. If Vashtorr can ascend, what does that mean for the Emperor? The Imperial Creed teaches that the Emperor is divine, that faith in him provides protection against chaos, that the prayers of quadrillions of humans across the galaxy empower and sustain him. The Ecclesiarchy has always insisted this, but the older institutions, the ones that remember the imperial truth, have dismissed it as superstition at best, dangerous heresy at worst. But what if they're both right? What if the Emperor of 10,000 years ago was a man, a powerful psyker, but still a man, and the Emperor of today is something else entirely, something forged from the faith of humanity itself into a god whether he wanted it or not? This is the secret that keeps Guilliman awake through the long watches of the night aboard the Macragge's Honor. His father denied divinity, built the Imperium on rationality and the imperial truth, tried to starve the Chaos Gods by denying their existence. But in dying, in being entombed on the Golden Throne, the Emperor became exactly what he fought against. Trillions of humans pray to him every day. They believe in his divinity with a fervor that would have disgusted the man who walked among them during the Great Crusade. And that belief, that faith, that psychic weight of worship has been accumulating for 10,000 years, flowing into the warp, crystallizing around the Emperor's consciousness like a pearl forming around a grain of sand. The man might want to reject godhood, but the God that humanity has created from him might no longer care what the man wants. Guilliman has seen this firsthand, and it haunts him more than any Xenos threat or traitor incursion. When he stood before the Golden Throne, when he looked upon his father, he felt two things simultaneously. First, a vast cosmic intelligence that regarded him with cold calculation, that saw him as a piece on a board so large Guilliman couldn't even perceive all its dimensions. Second, buried deep beneath that, a flicker of the man he remembered, the father who had given him Ultramar to govern, who had trusted him to build something better. That flicker recognized him, and in that recognition, Guilliman sensed something like regret. Or perhaps it was already too late for such human emotions. Perhaps what he interpreted as regret was simply the god's acknowledgement that the man's dreams had failed completely. The implications ripple outward like shockwaves. If the Emperor is becoming a god through worship, then every prayer strengthens him, but also transforms him further from what he was. If Vashtorr can ascend through faith in the machine, then the Mechanicus's devotion to the Omnissiah might be creating something separate from the Emperor, or merging with him in ways nobody intended. The warp is a reflection of mortal consciousness, which means the gods aren't creating the beliefs are creating the gods. Cause and effect become circular, paradoxical. Did chaos corrupt Horus, or did humanity's capacity for betrayal and ambition create chaos? Does praying to the Emperor protect you from demons, or does the act of prayer feed the warp entities you're trying to avoid? Where does faith end and madness begin when the universe literally reshapes itself according to what you believe? These are the questions that theologians in the ecclesiarchy spend lifetimes contemplating, usually before being declared heretics and burned for getting too close to truths that undermine the whole structure of imperial faith. But they're also the questions that will determine the fate of the galaxy. Because if gods can be born, they can also die. And if they can die, they can be killed. This is what the Eldar have always known, what makes them approach every conflict with the weight of a civilization that murdered its own pantheon through sheer hedonistic excess. When they look at humanity's worship of the Emperor, they see themselves before the fall. They see a species playing with forces it doesn't understand, feeding something in the warp that grows more powerful and more alien with every passing century. Some, like Eldrad, believe this is inevitable, that humanity's path mirrors their own and will end in similar catastrophe. Others, the more radical Farseers, whisper that perhaps this is the opportunity they've been waiting for, that a newborn god of humanity might be exactly the weapon needed to finally kill Slaanesh, that ancient predator that still hunts Eldar souls even in death. But weaponizing a god requires controlling it, and the Emperor has never been controllable. Even at the height of his power, during the Great Crusade when he walked as a man among men, his plans were labyrinthine, his motives opaque even to the Primarchs he created. Now, as something vast and incomprehensible burning in the heart of Terra, sustained by sacrifice and faith and 10,000 years of accumulated worship, the Emperor's goals might no longer align with anything recognizable as human interest. He might decide that humanity's survival requires its transformation into something else entirely. He might conclude that the material universe itself is the problem, and seek to merge it with the warp, creating a new reality where the distinction between thought and matter no longer exists. He might simply decide that after 10 millennia of watching humanity butcher itself in his name, extinction is the kindest option. And this brings us back to the Primarchs, because they are the only beings in the galaxy who knew the Emperor as a father rather than a god, who remember the man beneath the myth. When they return, all of them, they will have to answer a fundamental question. Do they serve the father they remember, or the god that father has become? Can they even tell the difference anymore? Guilliman has already made his choice, serving the Imperium even as he sees its corruption and understands that his father might not approve of what he's doing to preserve it. But what about the others? Lion L. Johnson woke to find his legion divided, their honor tarnished by secrets and paranoia. The Lion was always the Emperor's exterminator, the one who did the dark work that the other legions refused, who understood that sometimes humanity's survival required inhuman decisions. He will look at what the Imperium has become and see the logical conclusion of the Emperor's philosophy. Do whatever it takes to survive, pay any price, sacrifice anything and anyone. The Lion might be the only Primarch who approves of modern imperial policy, who sees the brutality not as corruption, but as evolution, as adaptation to a hostile universe. And that should terrify everyone. Lemon Russ, if he returns from his hunt in the Eye of Terror, will bring with him knowledge of chaos that no loyalist should possess. He went into that nightmare realm seeking a way to heal the Emperor, but what if he found something else? What if he discovered that the Emperor cannot be healed, that the separation of man and God is already complete, and that the only way forward is to let the man die so the God can fully emerge? The Wolf King was always loyal to the man, not the position. If he believes the man his father was is already gone, his loyalty might take forms that nobody expects. Corvus Corax is no longer the noble guerrilla fighter who led the Raven Guard. He has been transformed by the warp into something that hunts demons through their own realm, a creature of shadow and vengeance that barely remembers being human. When he emerges, if he emerges, he might be more weapon than Primarch, more useful as a tool to be aimed at enemies than as a leader to inspire loyalty. And tools can be pointed in any direction by whoever wields them. Jagatai Khan, the laughing killer, the one who valued freedom above all else, might return from the webway having learned the Eldar's greatest secret, that freedom itself is an illusion in a deterministic universe where gods play games with mortal lives. The Khan might have spent 10,000 years trying to escape fate itself, only to discover that every path leads to the same destination. What does a Primarch who valued liberty above all else do when he learns that liberty never existed? And Vulcan, the Perpetual, the only one who literally cannot die, carries the heaviest burden of all. He has lived and died repeatedly, experienced extinction and resurrection so many times it's become routine. He understands mortality from both sides, knows what it means to lose everything and continue anyway. His artifacts scattered across the galaxy aren't just weapons or tools. They're lessons, each one teaching something essential about survival, sacrifice, and the cost of immortality. When they're finally gathered and Vulcan returns, he will bring with him knowledge that might break even his brothers, the understanding that in an infinite universe, everything that can happen will happen, meaning every victory is temporary and every defeat is inevitable. The only question is what you do with the time between. These aren't the heroes who left. These are beings who have been broken and reforged by 10,000 years of isolation, transformation, and revelation. They will not unite easily. They will not agree on what must be done. Some of them might decide that the Imperium itself is the problem, that their father's dream has become so corrupted that the only option is to tear it all down and start over. Others might believe that the dream was flawed from the beginning, that the Emperor was always wrong, that humanity needs a different path entirely. And while they argue and scheme and prepare for conflicts between themselves, the real threats continue to advance. The Tyranid hive fleets adjust their approach vectors, probing defenses, testing responses, learning what works and adapting with terrifying speed. The Necrons activate more tomb worlds, their Silent King's plans unfolding on timescales that make human lifespans irrelevant. Chaos spreads not through corruption alone, but through the simple reality that in a galaxy this dark, this brutal, this hopeless, chaos offers meaning, even if that meaning is madness. The Tau expand with naive optimism that would be charming if it weren't so dangerous, believing in unity and progress, while reality prepares to teach them the same lessons it taught everyone else. Everything is converging toward a moment that feels less like a climax and more like a detonation. Not a single battle or campaign, but a fundamental restructuring of what the setting is. The 11th edition might not just be new rules and new models. It might be the moment when Warhammer 40,000 admits that eternal war is not sustainable, that grimdark taken to its logical conclusion becomes parody, that at some point you have to either change or die. And maybe that's what the Emperor has been waiting for all along. Not for humanity to win, but for humanity to be ready to become something else entirely. Not human, but not chaos either. Something new, something unprecedented, something that requires the death of everything that came before to make room for what comes next. The question isn't whether this transformation will happen. The question is whether anything recognizable will survive it. The Imperium is holding its breath. Across command decks and stratagems, war rooms buried deep in fortress monasteries and hive spires, the best tactical minds humanity has produced are staring at the same reports and reaching the same impossible conclusion. The enemy isn't just at the gates anymore. The enemy is everywhere, all at once, coordinated in ways that shouldn't be possible, moving with purpose that suggests intelligence far beyond what anyone predicted. The Tyranid hive fleets that were supposed to take centuries to arrive have accelerated. Necron tomb worlds are awakening in clusters, whole dynasties rising simultaneously as if responding to a single command. Chaos incursions are increasing in frequency and scale, demon armies manifesting in real space with a stability that violates everything the Inquisition thought it understood about warp physics. Something is synchronizing them. Not commanding, because these forces have nothing in common, no shared goals or communication. But synchronizing, the way waves synchronize when they approach shore, the way heartbeats synchronize when bodies stand close together. The galaxy itself is developing a rhythm, and every faction is beginning to move in time with it, whether they realize it or not. Guilliman sees it in the strategic displays, in the way battle reports from opposite sides of the galaxy show similar patterns emerging. He convenes his war council, the Lord Commander's personal strategists and advisors, the best minds in the Imperium. They spread hololithic projections across the briefing chamber, showing troop movements, warp storm patterns, Xenos migration routes. One of his lieutenants, a chapter master who has fought for 3 centuries, traces his augmetic finger across the display and stops. His voice is quiet when he speaks, but everyone hears it clearly in the sudden silence. "My lord, they're not attacking us. They're positioning, all of them. They're moving into formation." The realization spreads through the room like cold water. These aren't separate wars. This is the opening move of a single conflict so large that individual battles are just details in a pattern nobody has the perspective to see completely. The Tyranids aren't just hungry, they're herding populations, driving refugees toward specific sectors. The Necrons aren't randomly awakening, they're establishing a network, pylons activating in sequence across the galaxy like lights turning on in a vast machine. Chaos isn't simply spreading corruption, it's creating specific geometries in the warp, shaping the Imperium itself into something with structure and purpose. Guilliman dismisses the council and stands alone in the stratagem, staring at the hololithic galaxy spinning slowly before him. He thinks of his father's chessboard during the Great Crusade, how the Emperor would sometimes move pieces in patterns that made no sense until 5, 10, 20 moves later when the trap finally closed. Is this that? Is the Emperor orchestrating this somehow, using every faction in the galaxy as pieces in a game so complex even his own Primarchs can't see the board? Or is this something else, something emergent, the galaxy itself developing a kind of consciousness after 60 million years of war and suffering and psychic trauma? On Sortiarius, Magnus the Red feels it too. The Crimson King stands atop his tower of impossible architecture, looking out across the planet of the sorcerers at the libraries and labyrinths that extend in dimensions normal minds can't process. He has spent 10,000 years accumulating knowledge, diving deeper into the warp than any being save, perhaps the Chaos Gods themselves. He sees patterns in fate, reads timelines like scrolls, understands causality in ways that would shatter mortal consciousness, and what he sees now makes even him pause. The great game, the eternal conflict between the four Chaos Gods, is changing. They're still fighting each other, still competing for dominance, but underneath that conflict is something else. Agreement, not alliance, because Chaos Gods cannot truly ally, their natures are too contradictory, but alignment. They're all pushing in the same direction, even while appearing to oppose each other. And that direction is toward incarnation, toward manifesting in the Imperium not as temporary demon armies, but as permanent presences, gods made flesh, the warp and reality merging until the distinction becomes meaningless. Magnus has seen this future in his visions. A galaxy where thoughts become real instantly, where belief shapes matter, where the strong-willed become living gods, and the weak-minded dissolve into the thoughts of others. No more separation between idea and action, dream and reality, life and death. Everything existing in a state of constant transformation, the ultimate expression of chaos. And at the center of this new reality, the Emperor Ascendant, no longer bound to the Golden Throne, no longer pretending to be merely human, but revealed as what he always was, the first and greatest Chaos God, the one who predates and encompasses all others, the anathema made manifest. This is what Magnus believes, what he has convinced himself must be true. His father lied about everything else, denied the existence of chaos, even while wielding its power. So why not this? Why not the greatest deception of all, pretending to oppose the gods while always planning to become one himself? Magnus tells himself he sees clearly now, that his 1,000 years of damnation have given him perspective his loyal brothers lack. But deep in the parts of his consciousness he doesn't examine too closely. He knows this is just another rationalization, another excuse for his own failures and betrayals. The truth is simpler and more painful. He wants his father to be a monster because if the Emperor was always right and Magnus was simply wrong, then everything he's done, everyone he's killed, every corruption he's embraced, has been for nothing. The tragedy of Magnus is that he's brilliant enough to understand this about himself, but too broken to change it. So he watches the galaxy move toward catastrophe and tells himself he's ready for whatever comes, knowing he's lying but unable to stop. In the webway, Jagatai Khan runs. He has been running for 10,000 years, and the pursuit never ends. The Dark Eldar who initially drew him into this maze of ancient corridors are long dead, their souls feeding she who thirsts as all Eldar souls eventually do. But the Khan keeps running because he has found something in the webway, learned something that makes him unable to return until he understands it completely. The ancient Eldar built this network before the fall, wove it through dimensions to connect their empire, and in doing so they accidentally created something unprecedented. A space between the Materium and Immaterium, neither fully real nor fully warp. A third state of existence that shouldn't be possible. And in that impossible space, the Khan has discovered echoes. Not ghosts or demons, but something else. Memories embedded in the architecture itself, experiences so intense they burned themselves into the structure of the webway. He has spent millennia following these echoes, learning the history of the Eldar Empire at its height, understanding what they achieved and why they fell. What he has learned would change everything about how the Imperium understands chaos, the warp, and the nature of consciousness itself. The Eldar didn't just accidentally create Slaanesh through excess. They were trying to create a god deliberately, attempting to ascend collectively to a higher state of being, using pleasure and sensation as the psychic fuel for transformation. It almost worked. But at the moment of apotheosis, something went wrong. Instead of ascending, they inverted. The god they tried to create became their destroyer, feeding on them instead of elevating them. The fall wasn't a failure of morality, but a failure of execution, a ritual that backfired with genocidal consequences. And the Khan realizes with growing horror that humanity is attempting the same thing. The worship of the Emperor, The faith that has sustained the Imperium for 10,000 years, the quadrillions of prayers and sacrifices and absolute devotion, all of it is psychic energy being poured into creating a god. The Imperium is executing the same ritual the Eldar attempted, following the same path, making the same assumptions. And when the Golden Throne finally fails and the Emperor's transformation completes, will humanity ascend? Or will they fall just as the Eldar did, birthing something that devours its creators? The Khan needs to warn someone, needs to return with this knowledge before it's too late. But every time he approaches an exit from the webway, something stops him. Not physical barriers or enemies, but temporal anomalies, causality loops that make it impossible to leave at the wrong moment. He's being held in place, kept in reserve until exactly the right time. And he's beginning to suspect he knows by whom. His father, the Emperor, operating across time and space, positioning his pieces precisely. The Khan is not trapped. He's been deployed, placed where he needs to be for a moment that hasn't happened yet. And that realization is somehow more terrifying than being lost. It means everything, even his 10,000-year absence, was planned. It means free will really is an illusion, and the joke is on him for ever believing otherwise. Abaddon stands before the vengeful spirit's viewport, looking out at the Eye of Terror's madness. Behind him, the demon Primarchs wait. Mortarion, surrounded by clouds of flies and plague. Fulgrim, coiled and perfect and completely insane. Angron, barely contained rage given form. Magnus appears as a projection, unwilling to leave his tower but unable to ignore this summons. Even Perturabo has sent an avatar, cold iron and bitterness. Logar's chanting echoes from somewhere in the ship's depths, prayers to the chaos gods that never stop. Haven't stopped for 10,000 years. They are united for the first time since the Siege of Terra, brought together not by Abaddon's command, but by inevitability. They all feel it, the acceleration, the convergence, the sense that history is finally moving again after millennia of stagnation. Abaddon doesn't face them, keeps his eyes on the swirling unreality beyond the viewport. When he speaks, his voice carries no doubt. The long war ends soon. Not because we win or lose, but because the terms of engagement are changing. The Emperor is dying. The Imperium is fracturing. Reality itself is becoming negotiable. This is the moment Horus should have lived to see. He pauses, and in that pause, every Primarch present remembers their fallen War Master, remembers the strength and charisma and ultimate weakness that let chaos use him and discard him. Abaddon continues. We have spent 10,000 years fighting for the gods, but gods are parasites. They feed on us, grow strong from our devotion, and give nothing back but damnation. When the Emperor ascends, when he becomes what he always denied, he will be more powerful than all 4 chaos gods combined. And in that moment, we have a choice. Kneel to a new master, or break the board entirely. Fulgrim laughs, a sound like breaking glass. Bold words, little War Master, but you're still mortal, still limited, still ultimately irrelevant to gods. Abaddon finally turns to face them. His eyes are cold. Horus was chosen. I am self-made. That's the difference between us. He was always going to fail because he was always a tool. I am what happens when a tool decides to use itself. The demon Primarchs stir, uncertain. They have never heard anyone speak to them this way, with such absolute conviction. Abaddon looks at each of them in turn. You are bound to chaos. I am not. You think that makes you stronger, but it makes you predictable, controllable. I have spent 10,000 years letting the gods think they command me while I've been preparing for this. The pylons I've studied, the weapons I've gathered, the alliances I've forged, all of it pointing toward a single moment when I can do what none of you have the strength to do. I can say no. The silence that follows is profound. Then Magnus speaks, his projection flickering. You think you can resist apotheosis? Refuse godhood? That's not strength, that's suicide. Abaddon smiles, and it's not a pleasant expression. I watched your father try to become a god and fail. I watched the Emperor pretend he wasn't a god and fail. I've seen every attempt at ascension end in corruption or catastrophe. So yes, I will refuse. And in refusing, I will prove that mortality is not a weakness to be overcome, but a weapon to be wielded. The gods cannot understand choice because they are slaves to their natures, but we can choose. That's humanity's only advantage, and I will not surrender it for any amount of power. The meeting dissolves without consensus, each Primarch returning to their domains to consider Abaddon's words. But something has shifted. A possibility has been introduced that cannot be unintroduced. What if the path forward isn't ascension or damnation, but something else entirely? What if the answer to fighting gods isn't becoming one, but remaining defiantly, courageously mortal? Across the galaxy, on a million worlds, ordinary humans wake to another day of grinding survival, unaware that the cosmic powers determining their fate are starting to fracture along new lines. The battle for the future won't be between Imperium and chaos, humanity and Xenos, order and entropy. It will be between those who believe in transformation at any cost and those who believe some things are worth preserving even if preservation is impossible. Between those who think mortality is a curse to escape and those who know it's the only thing that makes meaning possible. And somewhere, watching all of this unfold across timelines and possibilities, the Emperor prepares to make his final move. The one nobody can predict because it violates everyone's assumptions about what he wants. Maybe even his own. The Golden Throne fails on a Tuesday. Not that time means anything to the trillions who will die in the aftermath, but the Tet priests will record it precisely in their logs before they too are consumed by what comes next. It doesn't fail catastrophically, doesn't explode or collapse, it simply stops. The ancient machinery that has sustained the Emperor's half-life for 10,000 years ceases its endless rhythm. The psychic shielding flickers and dies, and for the first time since the Horus Heresy, the master of mankind is no longer bound to his golden prison. The Astronomicon goes dark. Every navigator in the galaxy screams simultaneously, clutching their third eyes as the Emperor's light vanishes from the warp. Ships translating through the Imperium suddenly find themselves adrift in an ocean with no landmarks, no reference points, nothing to guide them home. Some emerge back into real space immediately, their crews age decades or reduced to infant-minded husks. Others will wander forever, lost in dimensions where time has no meaning. The Imperium's arteries are severed in an instant. A million worlds become islands in the dark. But something else happens too. Something nobody predicted. The moment the throne dies, the moment the Emperor is freed from the machinery that has been containing and constraining his consciousness, he doesn't ascend. He divides. The man and the god, the human and the divine, the mortality and the apotheosis that have been warring within a single consciousness for 10 millennia finally separate. Two entities where there was one. And both are screaming. The god emerges first, erupting from Terra like a newborn star. Pure psychic force given form, the accumulated worship of 10,000 years made manifest. It is vast beyond comprehension, beautiful beyond description, terrible beyond imagination. Every prayer ever offered, every sacrifice ever made, every moment of faith from every human who ever believed in the Emperor's divinity, all of it crystallized into a being that exists simultaneously in the Materium and the warp. This is the Anathema Ascendant, the God Emperor made real, and its birth sends shockwaves through the Immaterium that make the fall of the Eldar look like a ripple in a pond. The Chaos Gods feel it and recoil. This is what they feared, what they spent 10,000 years trying to prevent. A god born not from emotion alone, but from faith, from will, from the deliberate choice of countless beings to believe in something greater than themselves. Khorne's rage dims. Nurgle's despair falters. Tzeentch's schemes unravel. Slaanesh's hunger pauses. For the first time since their birth, the ruinous powers feel something they've never experienced: doubt. Not about their own existence, but about their supremacy. The God Emperor is not their equal, it is their superior. And it is angry. But then the man, the human consciousness that was once the Emperor, stripped of divinity, freed from the weight of worship, falls. Just falls like a puppet with cut strings, collapsing in the ruins of the Golden Throne. The Adeptus Custodes who have guarded this sanctum for 10,000 years rush forward. And they see something that breaks their minds. Their charge, their God, their purpose for existing is just a man. Ancient, withered, barely breathing, but recognizably, undeniably human. No golden light, no psychic presence, no aura of divinity. Just a dying old man who has been in agony for longer than their civilization has existed, finally, mercifully able to die. One of the Custodes, the Captain General himself, kneels beside this fragile thing. He has defended the Emperor for 3 centuries. He has never heard him speak, never seen him move. And now in this moment of ultimate crisis, the Emperor opens his eyes. They're just eyes. Brown, bloodshot, human. And he speaks. His voice is a whisper, barely audible, but the Captain General will remember every word for the rest of his life. I'm sorry. I failed, all of you. I thought I could save you by becoming something you could worship. I was wrong. Faith doesn't save. It transforms, and transformation is just another word for death. Let me go, please. Let me finally die. The Captain General doesn't know what to do. His entire existence is predicated on protecting this being. But which one? The God ascending into the warp, already engaging the chaos powers in a battle that's rewriting the fundamental laws of reality? Or the man lying broken before him, asking for the mercy of extinction? He reaches for the man, but before he can respond, before he can even process what he's seeing, the choice is taken from him. Roboute Guilliman arrives, tearing through the walls of the Sanctum Imperialis with a retinue of his Victrix Guard. He has felt the throne's death, felt the psychic shockwave that announced his father's transformation. And he has run, faster than he has ever moved, through the palace's endless corridors, knowing with absolute certainty that this is the moment, the one he's been dreading since his resurrection. He sees the Custodes surrounding something on the floor. He pushes through them. And he sees his father, not the God, not the corpse emperor, but the man. The one he remembers from the Great Crusade, aged impossibly but still recognizably him. Guilliman falls to his knees. He has commanded armies, ruled an empire, fought for centuries without faltering. But this breaks him. "Father," he says, and his voice cracks on the word. The Emperor looks at his son. Recognition flickers. Something like love, Roboute, my logistician, my empire builder. Did it work? Did you create something worth saving? Guilliman wants to lie. Wants to say yes, that the Imperium is glorious, that humanity thrives, that the dream lives on. But he is his father's son, and he cannot deceive, not now, not here. No, father. We built a nightmare in your name. We became everything you fought against. And I don't know how to fix it. The Emperor smiles. It's sad but also somehow relieved. Good, you're honest. That's more than I deserved. He coughs, and blood flecks his lips. He's dying quickly now, the separation from his divine aspect accelerating his mortal body's collapse. Listen to me. The God ascending right now, the one fighting chaos in the warp, that's not me. It's what humanity made from me. Their faith, their prayers, their absolute conviction that I could save them. I never wanted to be a god. But they needed one so badly they created it anyway, using my consciousness as a foundation. That thing will fight for humanity because that's what it was made to do. But it's not human anymore. It can't be. Gods can't be human. That's the point. Guilliman grips his father's hand. It feels small, fragile, nothing like the powerful warrior who created the Primarchs. What should I do? The Emperor's breathing is labored now. Each word costs him. The thing I should have done. Admit you don't have all the answers. Trust people to find their own way. The Imperium doesn't need a god. It never did. It needs honest leaders willing to make hard choices without pretending they're divine mandate. It needs people who can say, "I don't know," and mean it. It needs humanity, not holiness. He squeezes Guilliman's hand weakly. "I failed because I tried to be perfect. Don't make my mistake. Be flawed. Be uncertain. Be human. That's the only thing chaos can never corrupt, because it's already broken." And then he dies. No fanfare, no dramatic final words, no psychic explosion. The Emperor, the man who united Terra, who led the Great Crusade, who created the Primarchs and built an empire spanning the galaxy, dies the way all humans die, quietly, alone, despite being surrounded. One moment breathing, the next not. The transition so subtle you could miss it if you weren't paying attention. The Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes makes a sound that might be a sob. The Victrix guards stand in perfect silence, their expressions hidden behind helmets, but their shock palpable. And Guilliman sits beside his father's corpse, holding a hand that's already growing cold, and feels something he hasn't felt in 10,000 years. Not grief, though there's that too, but relief. The burden he's been carrying, the impossible task of living up to a god's expectations, is gone. His father wasn't a god, was never a god, was just a man who tried his best and failed, like all men eventually do. And if the Emperor could fail and still be worth mourning, maybe Guilliman's own failures aren't unforgivable. Maybe imperfection isn't damnation. Maybe it's just being alive. Above them, beyond Terra, beyond the Imperium itself, the God Emperor wages war in the warp. It fights the Four with power they never anticipated, matching Khorne's rage with righteous fury, countering Nurgle's entropy with militant persistence, unraveling Tzeentch's schemes with brutal directness, and denying Slaanesh's temptations with absolute conviction. The Great Game is no longer a game. It's an existential battle for supremacy, and for the first time in their existence, the Chaos Gods are losing. Not quickly, not decisively, but undeniably. The God Emperor is pushing them back, reclaiming warp space, creating zones of relative stability where human souls can exist without immediate corruption. But it cannot return to the Imperium, cannot manifest physically, cannot guide the Imperium directly, because doing so would require becoming incarnate, and incarnation would make it vulnerable, would give chaos a target they could destroy. So it remains in the warp, an eternal guardian, a lighthouse in the storm, fighting a war that will never end because gods cannot die, only diminish. It is exactly what humanity prayed for: a protector, a shield, a divine parent watching over them from beyond. Just not in the way anyone imagined. Not a god who answers prayers, but one who makes space for humans to answer them themselves. The Primarchs feel it, all of them, wherever they are. The death of the man and the ascension of the god, both occurring simultaneously. Lemon Russ howls from the depths of the Eye of Terror, a sound that echoes across dimensions. Jagatai Khan stops running in the webway, finally understanding why he was held in reserve. Corvus Corax ceases his hunt, the shadow thing he's become, pausing to remember what it was like to have a father. Vulcan's artifacts activate simultaneously, their purpose is suddenly clear. And somewhere, in places they've been hiding or planning or preparing, the other loyalist Primarchs know it's time. Not to save their father, because he's already gone, but to save what he tried to create, even if it means admitting it can't be saved, only transformed into something new. The traitor Primarchs feel it too, and their reactions split along the fault lines Abaddon predicted. Some see opportunity, a chance to strike while the Imperium reels. Others see threat, the God Emperor's ascension, meaning their own patrons are diminished. Magnus sees vindication, his predictions about his father's godhood proven true. Mortarion sees betrayal, the Emperor becoming exactly what he claimed to hate. Fulgrim sees entertainment, a new game to play. Angron sees only another target for his rage. And Abaddon, standing aboard the vengeful spirit, sees his moment arriving, the board finally set for the move he's been preparing for 10,000 years. The galaxy holds its breath, balanced on the edge of catastrophe and transformation, unable to tell which is which. The Imperium's infrastructure is collapsing without the Astronomicon, but ships are learning to navigate by other means, following the God Emperor's presence in the warp like sailors following stars. The Chaos invasions are faltering as their patron gods withdraw resources to fight this new threat. But mortal cultists are more dangerous than ever, unbound from divine leashes. The Tyranids continue their approach, unconcerned with theological crises, hungry as always. The Necrons watch, wait, and calculate, their ancient plans adjusting to account for new variables. And in the Sanctum Imperialis, Guilliman stands, leaving his father's corpse to the Custodes who will undoubtedly preserve it as a sacred relic. He walks out into the ruins of the palace, out onto walls where he can see Terra's scarred surface stretching to the horizon. Somewhere below, billions of humans continue their lives, most of them unaware that their god has just divided into myth and mortality, that the being they worshipped is simultaneously more powerful and less relevant than they ever imagined. He needs to tell them something, needs to address the Imperium, explain what's happened, provide guidance. But what can he say? That their god is dead? That another god has taken his place? That they've been praying to something that will save them, but cannot rule them? That they're finally, terrifyingly free to determine their own fate? He realizes, standing there in the ashes of certainty, that his father's final words were his answer. The Imperium doesn't need perfect guidance. It needs honest leadership. And honesty means admitting he doesn't know what comes next. But he'll figure it out, the same way humans have always figured things out. Through trial, error, adaptation, and the stubborn refusal to surrender, even when surrender is rational. Not because they're blessed or chosen or protected by divine will, but because they're human, and humanity's only consistent trait across its entire bloody history has been the inability to accept extinction gracefully. Guilliman doesn't make a grand speech that day. Instead, he does something unprecedented in Imperial history. He calls a gathering, not of generals or lords or high officials, but of ordinary people, guardsmen, factory workers, administratum scribes. A cross-section of humanity pulled from Terra's endless population and brought to stand before the Lord Commander of the Imperium. They come confused, frightened, certain they've done something wrong. Instead, they find a Primarch who looks tired, human in a way propaganda images never show, and he asks them a question. What do you want? The silence is profound. Nobody asks regular humans what they want. The Imperium tells them what to do, what to believe, what to die for. Choice is a luxury reserved for those with rank and privilege. One of them, a guardswoman who has fought on 6 different worlds and lost count of how many friends she's buried, finally speaks. Her voice shakes but doesn't break. I want to know it means something. The fighting, the dying. I want to believe we're building something, not just delaying the inevitable. Guilliman nods slowly. What if I told you I don't know if it means anything? That I can't promise you're building toward anything, more survival, more struggle, more loss? The guardswoman meets his eyes, and in that moment, something passes between demigod and mortal. Understanding maybe, or recognition. Then I'd say at least you're being honest, my lord. That's more than we usually get. This moment, this small exchange, becomes the foundation of what comes after. Not grand declarations or theological reforms or structural reorganization, just honesty. The acknowledgement that the Imperium's leaders don't have all the answers, that the Emperor wasn't infallible, that faith alone cannot save you, but might give you reason to save yourself. It spreads slowly, this new philosophy, carried by the guardswoman's regiment as they deploy to other worlds, whispered by scribes in administrative chambers, debated by priests who suddenly find their doctrines open to question. Not everyone accepts it. Many reject it violently, clinging to the certainty of divine mandate because uncertainty is more terrifying than any Xenos threat. Civil conflicts erupt, ideological wars within the Imperium itself as different factions struggle to define what they're fighting for now, that their god has transcended them. But Guilliman doesn't try to force compliance. Another unprecedented decision. He sets principles, boundaries that cannot be crossed. But within those boundaries, he allows variation, disagreement, even dissent. Some worlds embrace the new honesty, creating councils where citizens can voice concerns. Others double down on imperial orthodoxy, declaring the God Emperor more present than ever now that he fights for them in the warp. Both are permitted to exist, as long as they contribute to humanity's collective defense. It's messy, inefficient, everything the old Imperium would have crushed without hesitation. But it's also alive in a way the rigid theocracy never was, adapting and evolving rather than slowly calcifying into extinction. The other Primarchs return, as they must. Not all at once, but over the span of decades, each emerging when their presence becomes necessary rather than convenient. Lemon Russ comes roaring out of the Eye of Terror with knowledge of chaos that helps inoculate Imperial forces against corruption, teaching them that understanding the enemy isn't the same as joining them. Jagatai Khan exits the webway with Eldar allies, brokering an alliance that would have been unthinkable before, built on mutual recognition that extinction serves nobody. Vulcan's artifacts unite, and he returns not as a warrior, but as a builder, beginning the long process of repairing the Golden Throne, not to bind anyone, but to create a beacon that doesn't require sacrifice to maintain. Corvus Corax emerges transformed, no longer fully Primarch, but not entirely demon either, a liminal being who can walk between worlds and strike at chaos where it thinks itself safe. Even Lion L. Johnson, that most secretive of Primarchs, reveals the truth about the Fallen and the Dark Angel's shame. In the new paradigm of honesty, he cannot hide anymore. The revelation nearly breaks his legion, but it also heals them, finally allowing them to address corruption openly rather than obsessively concealing it. Some of the Fallen accept redemption. Others must be destroyed. But all of it happens in the light rather than shadow, and that makes all the difference. The traitor Primarchs respond to this new Imperium with confusion and rage in equal measure. They were prepared to fight fanatics, to exploit dogma and rigid thinking. But an Imperium that admits its flaws, that allows internal debate, that treats its citizens as people rather than resources, this is harder to corrupt. Chaos thrives on desperation and absolute conviction. It withers when people say, "I don't know," and keep fighting anyway. The wars continue, will always continue, but their character changes. Less existential, more tactical. The Imperium isn't trying to destroy chaos completely anymore, has accepted that such a goal is impossible. Instead, it's learning to coexist with horror, to maintain humanity without pretending the universe is kind. Abaddon makes his move finally, and it's not what anyone expects. He doesn't attack Terra or any strategic target. Instead, he does something that only makes sense if you understand his philosophy. He activates every Necron pylon his forces have captured, reverse-engineered, and rebuilt over 10,000 years. All at once, across dozens of sectors, the warp is dampened, pushed back, forcing reality to stabilize. Demons are banished. Chaos Marines find their blessings fading. Even the traitor Primarchs feel their power diminishing in these zones of null space. And in that moment of weakness, Abaddon turns on them. Not to kill them, because that's impossible, but to bind them, to trap them in stasis fields and psychic cages, to remove them from the board entirely. The Chaos Gods scream, but they're already weakened from fighting the God Emperor in the warp, and Abaddon has timed this perfectly. He stands before the imprisoned demon Primarchs and speaks to them for the last time. "You were God's puppets. I'm cutting your strings. Not for the Imperium, not for humanity, but because no one should be a slave, not even to beings as powerful as gods. You're free now. Free to rot in cages of your own making, contemplating what you sacrificed for power that was never really yours." Then he vanishes, taking his forces into the deepest reaches of real space, beyond imperial borders, beyond chaos influence, into the spaces between the light, where he can finally build something that answers to no master, divine or otherwise. The Imperium doesn't know whether to call him enemy or ally, and that's exactly how he wants it. He's proven his point, that mortality doesn't mean weakness, that refusing ascension is its own form of power, that the greatest act of defiance against gods is simply choosing not to play their games. Some in the Imperium want to hunt him, others want to study his methods. Guilliman makes a decision that will haunt strategic debates for centuries. He lets Abaddon go. Not out of mercy or alliance, but out of respect for someone who found a third path between damnation and salvation, even if that path leads to isolation. The Tyranids arrive in force, the true fleet that dwarfs all previous incursions. The Silent King's warnings prove accurate. They come in numbers that blot out stars, consuming world after world with mechanical efficiency. And the galaxy responds not with a single unified defense, but with a patchwork of alliances, strategies, and desperate innovations. The Imperium fights alongside Eldar and Tau, and even some Necron dynasties, not because they've overcome their differences, but because extinction is the only alternative. It's ugly, messy, filled with betrayals and miscommunications and friendly fire. But it works, barely pushing the Tyranids back not through dominance, but through sheer stubborn persistence. Years pass, decades. The galaxy doesn't heal, but it stabilizes. The God Emperor remains in the warp, an eternal guardian that never speaks, never manifests, simply exists as a counterweight to chaos. Prayers still reach it, and sometimes, rarely, people report feeling protected, guided, saved by something they can't see. Whether that's the God Emperor or their own courage given form in the warp, nobody can say for certain. Maybe it doesn't matter. The distinction between divine intervention and human willpower becomes increasingly meaningless when both produce the same result: survival. The Imperium transforms, slowly, into something that would horrify its founders and confuse its enemies. It's no longer a monolithic theocracy, but a federation of semi-independent sectors, united by mutual defense and the memory of what they survived together. Some worlds worship the Emperor as a god. Others honor him as a great human who tried his best. Still others barely remember him at all, focused on their own challenges and solutions. All are accepted, as long as they contribute when called upon. It's not perfect. There's still oppression, still cruelty, still countless injustices. But there's also hope, actual genuine hope that things can improve, that tomorrow might be better than today, that sacrifice might lead to something beyond more sacrifice. Guilliman lives long enough to see the beginning of this transformation, though he knows he won't see its completion. No one person could. This is a project measured in millennia, in generations that will build on what he started and probably curse his name for the problems he couldn't solve. And he's fine with that. His father tried to create perfection and built a nightmare instead. Guilliman aims lower, for something merely functional, merely human, merely possible. If his legacy is just giving people permission to try their own solutions, to fail and learn and try again, that's enough. More than enough. On Terra, in the ruins of the Sanctum Imperialis, they build a tomb for the Emperor's mortal remains. Not a shrine, exactly, though people will treat it that way. More a monument to imperfection, to the idea that even the greatest among us are still just us, still fallible, still learning, still trying. Inscribed above the entrance are his final words to Guilliman, the last thing he said before dying. Be flawed, be uncertain, be human. 3 sentences that become the unofficial motto of the new Imperium, repeated by soldiers before battle and scribes in their offices and parents to their children. The question that opened this story, whether the galaxy would shatter into something unrecognizable, has been answered. It did shatter. But from the pieces, something new is being assembled. Not better, necessarily, not purer or more noble. Just different, more honest, more human. And in a universe that has spent 60 million years proving that power corrupts and gods are parasites, and hope is a lie, that might be the closest thing to victory anyone could reasonably expect. The stars still burn in an uncaring void. Horrors still lurk in the spaces between thoughts. The warp still churns with malevolent intelligence. Nothing fundamental about the universe has changed except this. Humanity finally stopped waiting for salvation and started saving itself, one difficult choice at a time, one admitted failure at a time, one stubborn refusal to surrender at a time. Not because they're special or chosen or protected, but because when you strip away divinity and destiny and all the comforting lies people tell themselves, all that's left is the choice to keep going or give up. And humans, for all their flaws, are remarkably bad at giving up. Maybe that's not divine. Maybe it's not even admirable. But it's real. And in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, real is the rarest miracle of all. The story of Warhammer's 11th edition won't be about gods or monsters or cosmic conflicts that reshape reality. It will be about people, ordinary flawed mortal people, discovering that they were never as helpless as they thought. That faith in themselves might be worth more than faith in gods. That the greatest heresy isn't denying the Emperor's divinity, but finally accepting his humanity and recognizing it in themselves. Where is the story going? Wherever we take it. Together, uncertain, human, and somehow impossibly still fighting.